Kevin, you know that time in place was just in the lead of the Berlin around that night after I ate the marina. I slept really well. So it really is a super so
You start your herbs and veggie seedlings in your bedroom by the window, huh?
Oh, yeah, I used to. Good morning, everyone.
Good
I
morning.
am Leah, Gary's daughter, and today Gary is on vacation to Hawaii, so I will be teaching the class about starting your fall vegetable garden. So the most important question that I will start out with is, which vegetable is always cold?
Which vegetable is always cold? A cucumber?
Cold and what cold mean?
A chili pepper.
Wow.
Oh, there we go.
But yeah, I thought that was fun. But unfortunately, chili peppers do not like
Never
the
think of
cold.
that as cold.
Yeah,
Never.
yeah, they hate the cold. Usually, they will. Most of them will die if it does get too cold. So right now, if you still wanted to grow chili peppers for the fall, it's good to have one that's already pretty established, and so you'll actually get some fruit since it's still warm. And then once the night temperatures are below 55, that's when most varieties will die. But some varieties, like the really hot types, like the chili bean, chili de arbol, the ghost peppers, this is a scorpion chili pepper. Those tend to survive through the winter in this area, but they don't look as good in the winter. But I've had some go for like a few years and didn't have to.
In Anaheim, is that?
I haven't. I'm growing the Anaheim chili pepper right now in my yard, so I'm. So I'll let you.
There's so much variety in peppers. We should teach a class just on peppers.
Yes,
Maybe peppers and tomatoes.
yeah, there are lots of different varieties. There's too many.
I know.
They're all.
Oh, we have like 15 varieties.
Oh wow.
Long time.
Yeah. So that falls under this category usually by the end of October, going into November, when the temperatures are getting lower at night. That's when the chili peppers either die or stop producing as well. For tomatoes, they're pretty similar. We do have some winter varieties of tomatoes because everyone loves growing. Most people love growing tomatoes all year round. So we do carry the winter hardy varieties that can take cooler temperatures. They're usually like smaller fruits so that they develop quicker and you get more harvest. It's hard to grow like the beefsteaks this time of year because they need too much time. You might be running out of time if you planted right now a plant for like a beefsteak, really large variety.
What type of tomatoes are good for winter?
So
Actually, it says winter.
yeah, so all cherry tomatoes, anything really small,
What about
like
the Japanese tomato? They're very good.
yeah, the Japanese tomatoes, momotaro, they're usually like under 6 ounces. So those usually also do well during the winter. This one's called Siberia. A lot of times we say winter tomatoes. So it's a little too late to start from seed right now for the tomatoes, but if you get a plant that's already like a few inches tall, then that's good to go throughout the rest of the year. So Siberia is one that we carry. This one's called subarctic maxi.
Did you do anything different in planting them out for the winter?
Not too much difference. If you want to keep the soil for it more warm and insulated, I use a lot of mulch on top to keep the roots warm so that they can keep going in case we get any chilly nights. Another one of my favorite the winter tomatoes is stupici. That one's Stupice. It's a Russian variety. And that one is like a 4 ounce, smaller. The sun gold and the other cherry tomatoes, which since they're so small, they produce and develop faster. so you'll get more crops throughout the fall and winter season. So for this fall, it starts September 22nd, so we're almost to real fall. Hopefully the weather cools down a little bit more and it will start to feel like it. And then the first day of winter is December 21st, so we have a few months for the fall vegetable garden, but a lot of things go into December, January, February, like the brassica vegetables, which are broccoli, cauliflower, kale, lettuces, all the cool season veggies usually go through into the spring as well, because you don't tend to get any frost, which is usually January, February, the frost season. But yeah, we haven't had too many, so we don't have to worry about that. These are the average temperatures for here in Santa Ana. So there are a lot of vegetables that it's too hot right now if they're already big plants to develop their leaves, and some lettuces and broccolis might bolt, which I'll show you what that looks like. I brought some experiments from my yard. So cabbage. This one is broccoli. So these are experiments that I grew last winter, and after I harvested the crop, I cut it and just left the bush, and the broccoli just branches out into more. So this is what was trying to go through spring and summer, but it got too hot during that heat wave, so it bolted, which is when the head forms flowers, and then it will start to form seed pods at the end. I leave them because I want to save the seeds and just grow them other places in my yard. So if you want to save your broccoli or other vegetables to harvest the seeds, you want to make sure that the little pods that they form turn kind of brownish and harder, not too tender, before you harvest them, because then they'll be ripe and ready to grow. So, yeah, this is a broccoli. In the ground, you can expect them to get pretty big. Mine were about 3 feet tall and wide. So you want to make sure that you space them accordingly. Cauliflower, cabbage can get just as big. So in the ground, give them lots of space. In pots, little pots, I've grown them like this size before, and they tend to stay a little bit smaller because they don't have as much root space. But it's still possible. You'll just get smaller crowns. So that is the broccoli. I tried to do the carrots too. This is how they turned out. I harvested them this morning. This, I think, is either because it was too hot and my soil is very clay. I didn't really mix it over too much. I just threw the seeds out. And so it grew a little naughty, but it's still edible. It's just a little
You can eat the
flustered. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
When did you plant carrots? The carrots I planted about 3 months ago. I just spread the seeds out. This is what lettuce looks like when it bolts. This lettuce is a type of romaine called Thyrinus, and it's like a dark colored leaf. I try to do the dark colored leaves when it's warmer because they tend to be a little more heat tolerant. This one lasted a few months before it bolted when we got that 100 degrees heat wave, and everything just like, nope, nothing.
Kind of destroyed the universe, didn't it?
Yeah.
Is bolting meaning it starts to grow long, horizontal?
Yes, bolting means it goes up into the flower. And usually when it starts to do that, the smaller leaves become more bitter and pungent and not as ideal for salads. So usually you could just pull it out and grow something different or leave it for the seeds to replant later in a cooler temperature. So that's what lettuce shouldn't look like if you want to eat it. This one is arugula that has bolted, and this one I wanted to show what the seed pods look like. Yeah, it has pretty flowers. They're also edible. But so when the seed pods are ready, they'll be brown like this. So I'll pass this around. It's what they look like in the camera. So, yeah. So they should be kind of turning brown, and then they'll pop open and spread everywhere. So if you don't want them to spread, then I recommend cutting them off before they turn this color.
You lost 2 seeds.
Uh-oh.
Would you like the seeds?
That's all right. I have plenty. So yeah, they're coming up everywhere in my yard because I like arugula, so I let it go.
I've been wild, huh?
Yes. Okay. So these vegetables that I wrote down on the chart are the ones that you can start from seed. The best time to sow in the ground or in pots or little containers. So beets, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, carrots, celery, radish. Summer squash is this is the last month since it goes so fast, but no seeds starting October, November, December. It will be too cold for it to germinate. And then Swiss chard can pretty much go year round too. The arrows mean that they'll go through all the rest of the fall and winter. And then in October, the best time to plant the seeds for cabbage, kale, lettuce, peas, like sugar snap peas, spinach, turnips, and cauliflower. And then if you want to start onions from seed, then November is the best time. Usually we carry the onion bunches in December. So in order to get them that size, then you start the seed in November to get them to the bunching size. Onions are very delicious. For most of the root vegetables and whole vegetables, if you want them to create a big bulb, tuber, or root, you want to make sure that they get cooler soil temperature. So November, December, January, February, that's the best time for onions, garlic, carrots, not carrots, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, carrots are very hardy for the cold. They can take temperatures as low as 20 degrees, which not here, but other places they can still survive. More the campaigns. You also want to make sure when you do plant them that you rotate the crops. I'll get to that once we start talking about planting. There's different families for each vegetable. Fall squash. Fall is it too late? Well, fall like the summer squashes like zucchini and the crookneck squash, those are considered summer squash, which they grow so fast, they can still be grown this month from seed or from the little starter, but not after October, then it will be too cold. Spaghetti squash. Butternut, it's too late. It might be too late. Unless you have a really warm fall, it's best to start the winter squash varieties in like early June, July, so that they're ready to harvest in the winter.
Well, I said tall squash.
Yeah.
There's a such thing.
Fall
harvest squash.
Yeah, harvesting the fall would be a summer variety. So like peas, really fast. Yeah.
So like the pumpkins too, isn't it?
Yeah, unless maybe it's the Jackie Little tiny pumpkins. Those this year I grew and they developed really quickly within like probably 60 days. Those are always fun to grow. So when I sow the seeds, I'll show you some of my handy tricks. So I used to, when I didn't have a yard, I just did everything in pots and containers. And I would start them in these little 6 packs. There's different types. You can do the plantable ones, which are made out of cocoa fiber, and then you just tear them apart and plant the whole pot. But these I just reuse year after year, so it's I get everything, all the use out of them. I
No, you had to tear those apart.
the
The cocoa
plantable
ones?
pots.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can space them properly.
Oh, you mean separate them from each other. You don't mean you have to open them up.
Right,
You don't mean
yeah,
you have to rip the bottom off.
right, yeah, you can cut them.
Yeah, okay.
For the soil medium that I use to grow seeds is the acid mix, which is pumice rock and peat moss. I use that because it's a sterile soil and the peat moss holds a lot of moisture, so that's what seeds really prefer to start germinating. When you fertilize them, you want to be careful not to get too much fertilizer around the crown of where it will sprout, because if it's an organic fertilizer, that can cause rotting at the base, or they'll turn yellow and it's easy to overwater them. So I usually fertilize after they sprout because they have enough nutrients in their little seed to sprout. And then once I see that, then I put a little fertilizer on the outside of the plant. I use the Dr. Earth, like the granular fertilizer. Yeah, and you can also use the liquid fertilizer too. Those work faster than granular fertilizers. Um, and then also to protect the seedlings, I put a flat over it so that the little pill bugs or birds can't peck at it and get the little sprouts because they love taste. Yeah, so, and even if you're sprouting them in the ground, you can place this or something over it to protect it. So it still gets sun and water, but it protects it from the little crawling insects and birds that like to peck things out of the ground. Um, this has worked really well. I use it here a lot because the cats like to walk all over the flats, so that also helps prevent foot traffic. Any questions on starting with me?
You start with wet soil?
Yes. Yeah. After I put the soil in, I hose it down really well 2 or 3 times so that when I do plant the seed and I water it again, it doesn't sink to the bottom. That's very handy. You want to make sure you don't lose your seed. And each seed is different. There's like really tiny ones like the brassicas, and then larger ones like squash sunflower seeds. So the seed depth is usually the same as the size of the seed. So if the seed is like a 1/4 inch thick, then you would bury it a 1/4 inch. And if the seed is like little round brassica type, like broccoli seed or arugula seed, I sprinkle those on top and then just sprinkle a little soil to barely cover. I'll show you a picture of how I fertilize. When the seeds sprout, get the two little leaves. I make sure that the fertilizer is around it. Yeah, far enough away from the stem so that it doesn't cause it to rot. Um, you definitely have to be careful with some potting soils that have compost and fertilizer in them already. If they stay wet, too wet, then the seed will sprout, but then it'll rot if there's too much of the organic material around the roots. So those seedlings, you might have to let them dry out and then peel them before you water them again, just so that they don't get too much moisture. because that's just the oxygen being taken up by the organic material. And then for planting these vegetables, a lot of the brassicas, you'll see an example. So the brassica family, like Brussels sprouts, and this is collards, and then broccoli. Uh, if they start to get a little leggy, like they didn't get enough sun, or their leaves are shading them too much, you can, when you plant them, you can bury the stem up to the first leaves here. Because sometimes the stem will kind of go outwards and get kind of wonky looking. So when I plant them, I just bury it so that they're really sturdy and press it in so they don't fall over. So they can get pretty choppy. Then you fertilize them. Yes. And it's important too for starting the seeds that they do get some full sun, or like a little bit of direct sun, filtered sun, and plenty of water so they don't dry out while they're trying to root. There's uh, yeah, because if you do start seeds indoors, then sometimes you have to acclimate them if it's really hot and sunny outside before you put them outside because they can burn. So you don't want to start them in no sun and then give them direct sun because that could harm. What are the stories? Yes, yes. I start the seeds in filtered sun, but they can take full sun unless we get like a heat wave, and I cover them with the flat or some kind of shade.
Well, if you plant it, can you leave it under a tree?
You can, yes. Yeah, as long as it gets filtered sun, like morning sun is ideal to start the seed. Now we're talking about planting the vegetables in the ground and in pots. So, well, in the ground, which I have, so when you first plant it, it's good to separate the roots a little bit if it's really crowded. I take the bottom and I just peel it apart like that and then plant it. And if you need to, bury the stem a little bit and pack it down really well. And then right after that, I sprinkle the fertilizer around it like this, and then water it 2 to 3 times so that the soil can fully saturate. I noticed at my house I have a lot of clay soil, so if I don't mix a lot of um, like acid mix or top in with it, then it just doesn't absorb the moisture right away. I have to water it a few times for it to actually absorb. And that's important to get the plants established and ready.
Do you add alfalfa?
Not in the ground. I usually do that in pots and help them faster, but the ground usually has a lot of nutrients already from previous years. So I just use like the organic fertilizers. This is my favorite, the Dr. Earth Life, because it's pelletized, so it lasts 3 months rather than once a month like the powder form. Um, this I like to use in containers for sure because it has the microrhizae that help the roots get the nutrients. It helps break down the nutrients for the roots to get. the food, if that makes sense. um, and so it's really good to use that for containers if you're using soil that doesn't have fertilizer in it already. Then this will help, and the good bacteria to help get the roots fertilizer. In the ground, usually there's already mycorrhizae and beneficial bacteria to help break down the fertilizer. So then you can use like the down temper fertilizers or things that don't have mycorrhizae in them already. So for the ground, this is perfect. But for containers, it's good to add this one's a true biotic. And they sell the true biotic separately too sometimes with root helpers, root zone. Those fertilizers will have the beneficial mycorrhizal to help the roots get mature.
When do you use that combination of molasses and fish emulsion and the crop?
The combination of fish emulsion, molasses, and kelp is just a good fertilizer. You can use it year round on any vegetables, um, like broccoli, anything that you want to grow the leaves for, because it has a lot of nitrogen in it. But for lettuces, if you're harvesting and eating the leaves, you don't want them to taste fishy. So I usually use this around the roots. But that combination is good for like cauliflower, broccoli leaves if you want to form a good water for the leaf. I use uh, the fertilizers right away so they can break down and start giving nutrients. It does take time for them to do that, so that's why I like to put them down right away. If you want instant fertilizer, then like the Osmocote, the little pellet fertilizers, will give you really quick results within a week or just a few days. The organic fertilizers take a week or two to actually break down and start to show results, but in the long run, it's better for the soil and for the roots of the plant.
If you're using a raised bed, is that considered planting on the ground or in a container?
So, a raised bed would is kind of in between both because if it's already been used, there's already fertilizer from last year. Um, so it just depends. Like if it's your first planting, then I would use the mycorrhizae in the soil. If it's like already been planted, then you might not need to fertilize right away. But I always do because organic doesn't hurt the roots. Too much won't hurt. You know, there's some things that like a lot of fertilizer, like tomatoes, peppers. They like a lot. So some of those you have to do once a month or a big handful of fertilizer. And then right after I fertilize and then water, I put mulch on top to insulate. So like this time of year, if it's really hot, the mulch helps keep the water in the ground and it keeps the soil cooler for any vegetables that don't like it too hot, like the brassicas, the root veggies, radishes, carrots, um, and saves water. Hopefully, you won't have to water as much since you're in a drought. That really helps. I do up to like 3 inches if I can, but at least an inch is good to help keep the roots. So keep it back in the plant quite a bit. Yeah, the mulch the same as the fertilizer. Try not to let the mulch get to the stem. I kind of let it.
So you don't mulch it until after it's sprouted and had.
Yes. Yeah, if it's seedlings, like I did have mulch previously from the year before. So some of the seedlings I just sprinkled in and they came up and didn't rot. You just have to be careful not to overwater. Um,
On the mulch, if you're using old leaves around the yard, should you shred it?
oh no, you don't have to shred the leaves. I just let them because they'll break down pretty quickly with the elements, all the weather. Yeah. Yeah, that's another good thing if you don't want to buy mulch. I take the litter from my carrot wood tree in the front yard and all the neighbors, and I just put it all over my yard to keep it insulated too. But it's not as pretty, so in the front yard, I put mulch on top of it as to make it look better. The leaves sometimes it's pretty, but carrot wood leaves I don't think is very good by themselves. And then it's also good to remember crop rotation. So this one's important for preventing diseases from previous years. If a broccoli had like some kind of root disease or like bad nematodes, root knots, then you don't want to plant another type same family member in the same spot because that could also pick up the diseases that its relative um, had gotten the previous year. So this list here has the families. So like the tomato family consists of peppers, potatoes, eggplants, and tomatoes. The bean Fabaceae family, beans, peas, um, any legumes, the, and then the brassica family, the broccoli, lettuce, cabbage, cauliflower. So say I had the broccoli here 1 year, then in like the springtime, after the broccoli has been harvested, I would plant corn or squash, something unrelated to that, so that if it did have any diseases while it was growing, the corn or squash wouldn't be able to pick it up. And farmers, like my dad said, farmers do a 10 crop rotation, so 10 different families before planting the same family in the same spot again. That is quite a lot of rotation, but I think like if you put enough nutrients and beneficial mycorrhizae in the soil, that'll help get rid of the bad diseases and give enough nutrients to be strong. So after just like maybe 2 or 3 years, try planting the same family again. It's really nice for those who like plant tomatoes everywhere in the summer, for example. Like
Yeah.
we have those tomatoes before. Yeah, if you're limited on space, then I highly recommend using a fertilizer with the beneficial um, mycorrhizas and biology to help the roots be stronger, and prevent disease. There's also the beneficial nematodes that you can purchase online or here. This is, I noticed last year, everywhere I dug, there were grubs. The grubs are the baby larvae, really big baby larvae from the fruit beetle, those big green beetles that are really annoying and eat all the fruits this time of year. Um, so to get rid of those, there is an organic way, which are the beneficial nematodes. It's a little powder. They come in, and I just use like a teaspoon per gallon of water. I just pour them in the water, stir them up, and then water all the areas that I've seen the grubs in, and that will take care of grubs, fleas, fleas, fungus gnats, the few larvae that you don't want in the soil. They also sell online different types of nematodes, like for root knots and for the bad funguses in the soil. The root knot nematodes are ones that attack vegetable, fruit tree, any plant roots, and they kind of get all twisted together and don't grow properly. So there are organic cures for that as well. So those are handy to add if you're, especially if you have like a new garden and you want to start planting, make sure your soil is. Also, when you're planting, you can do succession planting if you want long harvests throughout the year. So sometimes I just plant seeds at different times, or if you have a little six packs like this, you can plant like half of them. And I've done it where I left the other half in the pack for another week or two, and they are kind of still stunted because once they're in the ground, they take off. But the ones in here stay stunted, so then they're a couple weeks behind when you plant them later. So you could do that um, if you want them throughout the year rather than all at once.
So, like that little six pack, how old are those? How long have they been sprouted?
These look like about a month. Um,
So we would be planting out on the ground and if we started down and be like, wait up.
these you could plant right away.
I mean, if we started now,
Um, yeah, when it well, you could plant them now if it as long as we don't get any more heat waves. Hopefully we don't, but it's hard to tell for this month. So yeah, next month is safer. Usually we don't get too many heat waves. No.
Well, if you plant it in a pot, you can move it around, and if you have a heat wave, you can pitch it inside.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So what she was saying is if you have a heat wave then and they're in pots, you can protect the pots by moving it into shade or filtered sun. That also works too. Or if it's just really hot, then like the 100 degrees weather. When I when I space each plant, I make sure that I grow the taller vegetables that behind everything. So say it's south facing or east east south facing. You want to plant the bigger vegetables like broccoli in the back, and then the smaller ones like the lettuces and radishes, beets in the front rows so that they don't block the sun from the other vegetables.
broccoli, which one, what is taller, like, well, Brussels sprouts, which was the short one?
Yeah, Brussels sprouts are shorter or taller, and then the broccoli and the tree collards, um, cauliflower. Some kales can get really large too. They'll just keep growing up and up. You can trim them, the kales, and they'll branch out lower. So like the dinosaur kale, the real lumpy leaf, I've grown and it just kept going and going. And then it was too tall, so I just chopped it and then it branched again with bushier. So that's controllable too. Yeah. Yeah. Natural trellises are fun. That's what I've been doing lately is I've been growing squash and melons up my other trees. So like if you have something tall like the tree collards, these go year round. So they just keep growing and growing. The one mother plant that we have outside, it is right now probably about 6, 7 feet tall. And that would be perfect to grow vining vegetables up like the snap peas, sugar snap peas, since they vine. If you don't have trellises like the bamboo tube to climb, then you can also always use trees, a fence, or other vegetables to grow them up, which is Malabar spinach. Um, Malabar spinach? Yes, that is a vine. But it likes the warmer weather. So usually in the fall, winter, go, they die.
I have a lot of seedlings.
Yeah.
They still,
Some people bring them in closer to the house or
Okay.
indoors during this time of year, and they'll keep going. The Malabar spinach is really hardy, um, like even to indoors. It just likes the warmer temperature. Um, any more new questions about plants? I just the tree collard. So what's the lifespan? The tree collard, our tree collard is about 4 years old. So it's still edible? Yep, yep, it's still really good. I chop up the leaves are huge, so I chop them up and saute them in butter and garlic, and that's really delicious. They're so big you can use them as taco wraps. But yeah, that it's really handy if you want green veggies all year round. Would that be best in the ground versus I have a raised bed about 3 feet off, and I've only got about um I think yeah, maybe 18. That's if you see the one out there, it's been in a pot. But we just transplanted it. So for 3 years, it was like in a 20-inch pot, and it went through the ground. So we put it in a bigger wood barrel that's about probably 24 inches maybe. And yeah, it keeps growing. We just chop it. This is a cutting from it. You just break off a branch, stick it in the ground, and then a new tree has formed. So they're very easy to propagate and grow if you want some natural trees. Do you have these in yours? Yes. Uh-huh. Yep, we have this one, and we have some 1 gallons out there as well. So those are always fun. You want year round. Yeah. If you are planting in a container, um, and you use the top pot or the acid mix, you can reuse them year after year. You just want to make sure that you don't use them for the same vegetable, like the same as crop rotation. So, like in my containers right now, my tomatoes, they didn't like the heat, so they all kind of melted. So I just pull out. You can leave the roots too sometimes for more nutrients, or just pull it out and plant something different. So right now I'm gonna plant beets and radishes, carrots in the pot that had the tomatoes, just because they're there. I don't want them to be empty. Just wanted to put Gary's soil. Yes. We're going to Yes. So yeah, Gary soil, it's easy to reuse year after year. I still replenish the fertilizer on top. But some other soils that already have the fertilizer and compost in it, then usually by this time of year, if there's been something in there, you just either throw it away or I just dump it out as a mulch for male plants, is the top right. Because it still can provide nutrients to other plants. So why should we care if I usually do this right? So mine's different. Yes, yeah. So for protecting the carrots, radishes, seedlings, Um, when before they pop up, you can leave this over them until they start to poke out the top, which like for a few inches, and that seems to help protect them. And then also, the bug and slug killer or the Sluggo Plus. This contains spinosad, and that is the organic ingredient that you can sprinkle on the ground around your vegetables or even spray the liquid form on the leaves to help prevent them from chewing it up, chewing any leaves. So this is good for any chewing insect um, around your leafy greens. And then there's also a spray form too. My dad has mentioned the spinosad is a bacteria found in rum barrels, so it's safe for human consumption, pet consumption, but will kill the bugs without that. And then for sucking insects like aphids and mealybugs and um, scale, the neem oil or the um, essential oil sprays, like the Dr. Earth has the rosemary oil, garlic oil, things that smell bad and deter the insect. And also the oil will suffocate them if we spray them directly on the bug. So these we have to hit the bugs directly. So that's why I like to use the hose one because you can just do one big sweep over everything. If you just have like a couple plants, then this is fine. Um, one other natural way to deter insects are chrysanthemums or sprays that have pyrethrin in it. Um, the chrysanthemums have natural pyrethrins. That's a chemical that poison bugs. Um, you do have to be careful though. Like me, I'm very allergic to chrysanthemums. I found that out.
Why are you holding up?
Yeah, I'll touch it. Found that out when making floral, like little arrangement color bowls. And I was like touching the roots and taking off soil and planting them with other things. And then every time I did it, I just felt really like lightheaded. I got a headache and I couldn't breathe very well. And I'd walk away and be fine. Realize, oh, I'm allergic. So some people are allergic and some people are fine. So yeah, be careful. Use gloves when using chrysanthemums, just in case you are. I don't think too many people are.
In your vegetable garden, where would you put the chrysanthemum?
So I would place them around like a border or in between. So then you give your vegetable garden a little bit of color, along with protection for from insects. But they repel them. Yeah, I think that insects can tell when there's poison nearby, so it just stays away. Because I don't tend to have any bug issues with chrysanthemums. Um, I think certain chrysanthemums, like the edible varieties, don't contain pyrethins, but I know for sure these do because I've witnessed that. Add color and brighten up your vegetables. There are a lot of other plants, like with edible flowers, that I like to add to the vegetable garden for color. Or if you're like making salads, you can put in some flowers that are edible to make it look pretty. I like to make it look pretty. So I'll show you a few of those. Um, these are really fun. The begonia, we just started growing these double, triple flower begonias. All the begonia flowers are edible. They taste kind of like a lemony citrus flavor, and I think they're really cute. They're very prolific. They can take full sun or shade, so it's good for any areas in your garden. And for me, when I grow them in the ground, they go year round. I guess because I put enough mulch on it, it keeps it safe from the cold because they thrive in the heat. And then in the winter, if we do get a frost, they may die. But for my house, I live in Santa Ana, kind of near Costa Mesa, so a little more coastal than here. But they've been going strong. So those are always a good option to add some color.
How do you water your fall lizard light vegetables?
Right now, I water by hand. So this time of year, I've been watering every morning for for the veggies and the fruit trees and the flowers, even though I do put mulch. And then once it gets like in the 70s, like 75, 70, then I tend to water every other day, just when it if it gets hotter, then I'll water a little bit more.
The hand waters.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
yeah.
And then your seedlings, you probably water it this way.
Just once a day. Yeah, because I've been working, so I can't go home and water. But yeah, I'm working on a sprinkler system, which is much easier for everyone. But yeah, the hose by hose works too. That helps. Like in the morning, it's good because on my squash and leafy greens, I blast the leaves down just in case any mildew spores have landed on them. That keeps them clear, and then they have the rest of the day to dry out so that the spores can't spread. Because mildew has been a pretty big issue this year with the humidity. To prevent it, sometimes if you see even a little bit of mildew start, the oil spray will take care of that, like the neem oil or horticulture oil. Those you spray directly on, but make sure that it's not too hot during that day. Spray more towards evening so that the leaves don't burn in the sun. If it's like 90 degrees, then that could cause burning, which looks like crispy edges. So you know damage from this. You can see the crispy edges along the side of the leaf. I'll go back to some flowers that you can add to your vegetable garden. Like marigolds, those can take temperatures. Once it's like in the 50s, like below 50, then that's when they tend to be really sad. Um, but right now, it's still pretty warm to add some fall color in between your plants. This a lot of farmers use to attract bugs to them so that they stay away from other vegetables. So the scent, I don't think is really to deter. Like they do have a strong scent. It could deter some, like maybe flies, but snails and slugs love to eat the flowers, and we can eat them too. So they love them. But usually that's why they're planted is to be be trapped. They eat this instead of your vegetables. Nasturtiums, you can kind of see nasturtiums are another cool season. They like the cooler temperatures. Um, edible flower and a leaf. So if you like kind of the radish, spicy flavor, that's what the leaves and the flowers taste like. And if you want some color, the fierce trailing and ground cover types, but they do seed and come back everywhere. So if you don't want them all the time in your yard everywhere, then I would keep them
Subtle warning.
away, spaced out with like a hidden basket or in a pot so that they can spread everywhere. But they do make a really nice ground cover if you want to keep the soil cool around your other vegetables. They'll just be there forever. So just beware. One of my favorite fall flowers are stalk. Those also have an edible flower. It's kind of like a little spice of gingery cardamom flavored, and they smell really nice too. Some some people don't like it's too strong, but I like the smell. I put them in. I made lemonade. I put them in there for decoration, and those um, there's different types that get really big. Some can get 4 feet tall, like the column mix, and then these are short, little vintage. Are the leaves edible? They should be. I haven't tried the leaves. I'm not sure. I think the flowers are the best. But, and for some, like the herbs too, most of the herbs are perennial. That if you want to stick some in with the vegetables, because like some you like eat a lot of in salad, like parsley, cilantro. Those are all good for this time of year. Most basils die when the temperatures are below 55 degrees at night. So it's best, like this is probably the last season to grow, or the last month to grow regular basil. This one I brought out is one of my favorites, along with the African blue basil. This is Pesto Perpetuo, which is a perennial type basil. So this one can handle the cooler night temperatures if you want to keep growing basil throughout the year. This one I think has a little bit less pungent flavor than the African basil. So if you want, I think the like closest to sweet basil would be the pesto basil. That one smells really good. Tastes delicious.
Is there similar Thai basil? The
Thai basil isn't as hardy as this. Usually Thai basil does die if it's below 55 degrees. Cilantro, it still is a little dangerous to grow this month because it doesn't like it above 75 degrees. But I've grown it. Some yards have little microclimates where you can keep it cooler, like under a tree or a south facing side of the house where it only gets morning sun, insulated with mulch. If you do grow them in a container, make sure the container is a light colored pot or like breathable fabric pot so that it doesn't heat up and then that'll cause them to bolt. So you want to keep the ground as cool as possible for them. And if you keep them really well watered and mulch insulated, then they tend to survive through a little bit of heat. Definitely not above 90, but if it stays in the like mid 80s now, cilantro will you can you can keep it safe by doing those.
it's not like 105 degrees.
Nope.
It's only that.
Yeah, yeah. Cilantro will bolt like lettuces. They send out really pretty flowers. So a lot of people use those for arrangements or even for attracting the good pollinators. Those flowers are excellent, and the seeds you can save and eat those too. Those are used for culinary, and if you let them dry up, I just collect them and sprinkle them all over, and then once it's cooler, then they'll sprout. Dill is another popular herb that is grown in fall. It doesn't like it hot like cilantro, so there are ways to protect it, similar to the mulch on filtered sun. And then it is also sensitive to too much cold. So in the winter, if it gets like below 50 at night, then that could harm it. But fall is perfect time for dill. And then it also makes a nice flower too if it does get too hot um, to attract the pollinators. Few other herbs that are good to add in the fall vegetable garden if you like the scent of curry. This is the curry bush. It's not really used for culinary purposes. It's mostly used just because it smells nice. And the foliage is silver, so it really stands out with the greens. And if you have like dark lettuce, it adds some different color and texture around if you're trying to make it edible and beautiful. That. And then shiso also is a very good fall um, leafy green. That one can get pretty big, probably 2 to 3 feet tall. The leaves are they're related to basil, but it's more of like a sesame flavor. Um, if you want like a different flavor in your salads, and some like Asian restaurants, they fry it or use it as a pretty garnish on your plate. But I think they taste delicious. And so that's always a good plus. They come in green too. Shiso. Shiso. And then another delicious leafy green is lovage. That one, you can also use it to attract the swallowtail butterfly. They're they're it's a host for the caterpillar. So that if you want butterflies and to eat, it tastes like celery. The leaves, if you like the celery flavor, the leaves get
Celery.
big. Yeah, yeah, they're related. The leaves get pretty large, so those are good to use. I use it in soup a lot. Um,
What is that? Celery?
Lovage. Yeah. I love the smell of celery, so that's always a good plus in the vegetable garden. So for growing in containers, um, if you don't have the space in the ground, then like some people like to have window boxes and or pots or like a bowl, kind of like a lettuce bowl. But here it does stunt the growth of some of the larger vegetables. Like it might be hard to grow a lot of broccoli or cabbage in this, but lettuces and beets would do really well. So like the lettuce, I would space about 6 to 8 inches apart, and then I like to put shorter flowers like violas or the ornamental cabbages and kales in between to give it a little bit of color and design. So like this side would be perfect for leafy greens. You could do kale, but eventually it will get pretty big, so you might have to trim it back. And when I harvest the lettuce, I harvest the outer leaves so that it keeps growing in the center.
So in the winter, can you grow your lettuce, say, indoors or by the window?
It's hard because they do need direct sun,
Okay.
full sun, like at least maybe 4 hours. 6 is ideal to form the leaves properly. Um, but if you do get direct sun through a window, you have to be careful that it's not too close to the window that it could amplify the heat. So further back, few feet. Um, Outside is safer. In the summertime when it's hot, I do it under a patio cover or just morning sun. On one side of my house, I get 4 hours of morning sun, and that seems to be like perfect for the leafy greens and broccoli to protect them from the afternoon. And light colored pots. You don't use like a black pot that will heat up too fast. Any other questions about planting pots in the ground?
Well, like in that dome one, I have my Malabar spinach in that. Is that a little shallow? But
No, that's fine.
that's fine.
Yeah, as long as you keep it well watered, because the Malabar spinach can get pretty big, so the bigger and faster it grows, the more water.
I don't need to transplant it, just the
Yeah, that's fine.
maybe buy a trellis, get a trellis.
Yes, it'll like to climb the trellis.
So if I'm planting food like carrots and radishes in little pots to transplant later when it's longer, I kind of bunch them in a pot, like I see in the home part.
Yes, it's radishes and carrots. Once you transplant them, I would transplant them about like 4 to 6 inches apart. Because you can see they get pretty wide.
But it's okay to start them close in the pot first.
Yeah, yeah, and then you can separate them, and well, that takes up quite a few. Yeah, about 4 to 6 inches. That's it. They can get pretty big. I wanted to show you the mulch I like to use. Um, so this one is called Western Fir Bark, and it's the small chunk. It comes in a small, medium, and large. The small chunk I think is nice and decorative for the yard. I use also the bark mulch, which is a shredded, more finer type of mulch, but it's not as pretty, I think, as this. So I use the bark mulch in my backyard where nobody really sees. And in the front yard where I have my like, flowers and landscape, I put the larger chunks. Um, I am going to start trying to do the really big chunks of mulch. So these are still large, but they're considered the small. And then the large is actually like pretty big because I have cats in my yard, and they just came with the house in the neighborhood. I know they're good because they keep the rodents away, but they poop everywhere. And so Gary said that the larger chunk mulches prevent them from digging it up. Yeah, no litter boxes. Yeah, so that's my next goal is to try that bigger chunks to prevent cats everywhere.
You also the bark mulch.
Yes, yeah, most of the mulches come in a 2 cubic foot bag. Um, that depending on how thick you lay it on over, like a 10 by 10 area, it's like an inch. But I like to put out high, especially in the summertime, to keep the water from evaporating.
What's the also that make changes that
The size, not too much. Nutrient wise, the smaller the chunk of the mulch, the faster it will break down and give nitrogen to the plants. So that's a plus. If you don't fertilize often, then the smaller mulches will give more nutrients. The larger ones will last longer, but they won't provide as much nutrients as the smaller.
and they put the exciting factors.
Mhm. Covers most of the thing. There's a few more fertilizers that we're mentioned yet. So for like a lot of the leafy greens, like spinaches, lettuce, kale, chard, um, since those are mostly grown for the leaf growth, you want a lot of nitrogen, which is the first number in the ratio. So like blood meal has a lot of nitrogen. So does like fish, the biofish, and seaweed. So you can either do a foliar spray or the granular for leafy greens to provide nitrogen, and that will give you nice, healthy leaf. Also, if you're growing root vegetables for the roots or the head vegetables for the crowns, like broccoli, cauliflower, then you also want some of the phosphorus for flowers because technically the that is a flower bud, and so the phosphorus helps that develop. And then the nitrogen is important too, so that it can grow a lot of leaves and get really big to form a big crown.
For beans and turnips.
beets and turnips. Those
The other one,
this
one?
this one's perfect. Yeah, to help the root form.
How often do you fertilize?
This one's usually once a month. Um, it just depends how much you put down. I like to put down a lot, like a cupful around each vegetable, so that I don't have to reapply it every month because I just don't remember to.
Yeah,
It doesn't
how do you
hurt to do a
remember?
lot. Yeah, and some people like to scratch it into the soil, but I just leave it on top because I know it's there, and then once it breaks down, it'll slowly go down instead of already being halfway down. Then that sometimes it can waste the nutrients.
Can you also apply that same principle with the Dr. Earth
Yeah,
fertilizer? Just put it on top and watch it
Yeah.
get down.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Same with this year. I did this for all my vegetables, and I only applied once. They did really well.
So, like in the layers that I have soil mostly sandy, and some I have, yeah, I have like sand mold. And then I'll put mulch on top. And then when I finish when I plant, I'll pull that back and put fertilizer around it. When I refertilize, I'm just putting it on top of the mulch,
You could do
or
either.
I should leave it back.
You could do either. Yeah, if you put the fertilizer on top of the mulch, I just water it in really well so that it falls through onto the ground.
They're lazy.
Yeah, not lazy, just practical. Yes. Any other questions?
Can I ask a question about the avocado tree?
I'll try.
I have mulch all around it, its own leaves. Now, because I haven't fertilized it, should I use the all-purpose fertilizer and just sprinkle it on top because it's all its own dead leaf all on top of the top?
Supposedly, the leaves are enough fertilizer for the avocado to not have to fertilize, but if it's a new tree, just been there like a year or two, then it doesn't hurt to add more to give it a boost. But the leaves should be enough.
You mentioned something about efficient taste from some of the fertilizers.
Yes.
Could you explain that again?
So if you spray the liquid foliar fertilizers like the kelp meal, fish emulsion, they do provide good nitrogen. But if it's something that you're going to be harvesting like lettuce for a salad, you might not want to spray that
To the surface.
on the surface because it could pick up that flavor. It's okay to use it in the beginning when they're still small, but once you get closer to harvesting, you probably don't want that just in case you don't want the fish. Yes. Yeah. Spraying them on the foliage, the plants are able to absorb the nutrients quicker than the roots are. I think that covers everything. If anyone has any more questions, feel free to email me too. My email is lhhelp@gmail.com. And free to answer any other questions if I forgot to say something. This was kind of
Specifically, would you go to for pill
for pill bugs.
pill bugs?
For pill bugs, well, this will kill them. Anything with spinosad. What I do in my yard is I feed them my food scraps so that they don't eat my vegetables. So like I just collect like my watermelon rinds, orange rinds, any food scraps, and I just kind of fertilize on top with that, and they eat that instead of
For cats.
yes. Yeah, so
Maybe I should be happy for my cats.
yeah, because the pill bugs are just doing their natural thing and helping break down organic matter. So if they have it, like if they have the mulch to eat and the food scraps to eat, they're breaking it down and their poop is fertilizing the plants. So they are good sometimes, but if there's not a lot for them to eat, then they will go after your fresh vegetables and fruits.
I've been out to the garden at night and like where there's a plant, it's just like a tower of pillbox.
Oh, yeah.
It's like the seedling.
Yeah. So they're doing their job, but sometimes we don't like their job. So that's why I feel bad killing them. So I just feed them something else that I'm done with, so that they leave my things that I do want safe alone.
I I have small tomatoes buried in my woods bed. Um, and I would go poles and it's a big feeding station for the red wigglers.
Oh, okay.
And last early summer, one day I picked it up and there not only the red wigglers in it, but a ton of red. And I never once saw them on top, eating the plants, but they had found the kitchen scraps that were in that feeding station.
Yeah,
So
underground.
I
Yeah,
can see why just throwing something like the
the food
lines
scrap.
from melon that just went up.
Yep, that'll attract them to that. Yeah. This Yeah, because throwing food scraps out is similar to composting if you have the bugs already there to break it down. So like feeding compost to your worm bin, it's the same as like feeding compost to the pill bugs, the snails, slugs, earwigs. Those, if you have the food scraps there already, and the bugs, those are the natural way to break down the nutrients to give to your plant. I'm too lazy to make the compost bin, so I just throw it all in my yard and let the critters do what they do.
What was your
My email is L as in Laguna, H as in hills, N as in nursery, the word help at gmail.com. And I have it on a card too. And that's for anyone that's listening on YouTube live if they have questions for me later. In the video. It's really good. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. Show.
On the veggie.